So in the Siddur, we're on page 106 or 107. We're up to a famous bracha, Malshinim, against heretics, or what we'll see. And I want to compare this with a passage in the book of Esther. That will be in the Blue Book on 1255. We'll take a look first at the blessing. Now, the official title of this blessing, as the Art Scroll has it, is Birkas Aminim, and in English it's against heretics, even though in the Ashkenazi version, it doesn't mention minim. So I have to sort of take that into account. The first word in the Ashkenazi version is malshinim. You translate here slanderers. A malshin is not exactly a slanderer. Slander, I think, by definition in English, means you lie about somebody. A malshin is not someone who necessarily lies. He's someone who goes to the authorities and exposes what Jews are doing, which in normal moral and social terms may be perfectly innocent, but the authorities don't like it. And therefore he gets in trouble with the authorities. And these malshinim can in fact be Jews who, because of their knowledge of what Jews are doing, can be informers to the authorities. When the Soviet Union was founded and they had their secret police, there was a division in the secret police which was called the Yevsektia, and that was the division that took care of Jews. Finally, Jews who baked crackers in the spring, in secret bakeries, and have private pools, for their religious practices, and the people who populated this section of the secret police were former yeshiva students. Went over to communism, went over to the bureaucracy of the Soviet Union, and used their knowledge as to make sure in the springtime there are no private bakeries, and make sure there are no private pools, and so on and so on. No chickens in late September, to use for kapparas and so on and so on. And in the Roman times, this was just death. If you tell the Romans that the Jews are doing X, Y, Z, they would come and just kill them, that's all. So these are really vicious people. As I say, there were even Jews who did that. So this is not an non-Jew animus here. Let there be no hope, and all evil shall disappear in an instant, and all your enemies should be speedily cut off, and those who are deliberate criminals should quickly uproot and break and smash and subdue. How do they translate it here? Cast down. Quickly in our days. Blessed are you, Hashem, who breaks the enemies and humbles the malicious sinners. Now, if you have your good anti-Semitic scruples up, and you're thinking in those terms, and you're reading it like a 6-year-old, how horrible, how terrible, look at this, look at the way they think about people. They think about destroying their enemies and so on and so on. And if you calm down and you try to put your prejudice aside and look at what it says, I think that you will find that does not have that animus at all. And number one, and when we compare it to a well-known passage on record, which the authors of this blessing had on record, namely, where Haman decrees the destruction of the Jewish people, you'll see that the vocabulary is very different. And you'll have to ask yourself why the authors of this blessing didn't use the vocabulary of Haman as a precedent for what they want to write. So let's read through it again, and let's pay attention to the exact meanings of the words, and also in particular the order of the words. So, these informers, there should be no hope. Well, they're informers. So, for one thing, you're saying, let there be no hope for them to inform on the Jewish people. Maybe their businesses should go down the drain. No hope. Does that mean they're dead? No, it means they're hopeless. In both senses. And all the wickedness, rish'ah, shall perish in an instant. It doesn't say the wicked people shall perish in an instant. It's the wickedness that shall perish in an instant. And the authors of this blessing had in front of them the famous example of Rabbi Meir, where Rabbi Meir had in his neighborhood certain people who were distressing him, making life difficult for him in ways that were criminal, and he prayed that they should die. And his Rebbitzin, Bruria, said to him, why are you praying that they should die? Why don't you pray that they reform? Doesn't say, Kol HaRishoim Ba'ashan Tichla. It says, Kol HaRisha Ba'ashan Tichla. At the end of days, all the wickedness shall go up in smoke. Not all the wicked people will go up in smoke. So he changed his prayer, and they did in fact reform. So that's on record. That's the incident that happened. So the authors of this blessing, I'll tell you who the author was at the end, specifically says wickedness should perish. Doesn't say the wicked should perish. And since that includes the possibility of doing reform, he's not asking for them to be, to die. Now, all your enemies, that's very important. It's not our enemies. It's your enemies. We're talking to God. All your enemies should be quickly cut off. Here you have the famous pair of verses, which the commentators explain. One verse says, "Ben poil oivecha al tismach." When your enemy falls, don't rejoice. And the other one is, "Ba'avod shoy rina." When the wicked are destroyed, there's great joy. Right? So now you say, hold on, am I supposed to be happy or not supposed to be happy? And the answer is, look at the difference of the vocabulary in the two sentences. One says, your enemy. When your enemy, why is your enemy? I don't know, I don't like him. He said something nasty to me. He has a different political opinion than me. Does that make him wicked? Not necessarily. Maybe if you're God, or if you think you're God, which does include a lot of people today. But the fact that he's your enemy, don't rejoice. And people don't know the end of that verse. The end of that verse is, don't rejoice when your enemy falls, because if you do, God may take his anger away from the enemy and put it on you. So don't do that. Don't be stupid. In fact, the Gemara says Rava was sick, and the second day he told his servant to go out to the marketplace and announce to people that he's sick, because he said, if my friends find out that I'm sick, they'll pray for me and they'll help me recover. And if my enemies find out that I'm sick, they'll rejoice and that will help me recover also. Because the verse says that when you rejoice at the fall of your enemy, God will take the anger from your enemy and put it on you. So if my enemies are happy that I'm sick, God will take his anger away from me and I won't be sick, and they'll get sick, which is what they deserve because they're my enemies. Right? So you have over here that in this blessing, what we're asking is that God should arrange that his enemies should be swiftly. Well, that's perfectly all right. And even so, they shall be cut down. You can, we talk about cut them down to size. that doesn't mean bury him because he's in pieces. It means reduce his size. It's poetry, not exact. Hazedim, these are people who do their wicked deliberately, shall be quickly uprooted, not burnt into ashes, uprooted. It means no nourishment for them. Broken, smashed, and humbled. Now you tell me, can you humble someone who's dead? I don't think so. Once he's dead, there's no more humbling to be done. If humbled is the last word in the sequence, it means the previous words in the sequence do not imply that he's dead. Because if they did, then saying humbling him at the end would be nonsense. And that's what would be quickly in our days. Blessed are you, Hashem, who breaks the enemies and humbles the deliberate transgressors. So the last thing in the blessing is to humble, which definitely implies that they're not dead. So this is not, drop an H-bomb on my enemies. That's not what it's saying. Now, if you take a look in the book of Esther, where Haman says to the king, there's a whole nation that's worthwhile to destroy. At the end of chapter 3, in the Art Scrolls on page 1255, and he writes a document describing what should happen to the Jewish people. So in verse 13, it says, letters were sent by courier to all the king's provinces to destroy, to slay, and to exterminate. Okay, destroy, is a word that we do have in the blessing. But laharog, which means to kill, and la'abed, the people, which means to exterminate, is not written in our blessing. So if the author of the blessing meant to convey the utter annihilation of our enemies, he should have used this vocabulary, and he doesn't. So obviously that's not what he means. Now, who's the author of this blessing? This blessing was added. I told you once that there are 18. We call it the Shemona Esrei because that means 18. Because there are 18 blessings. We have 19 blessings. This blessing was added late when there were informers who were drawing the Jewish population into danger, causing them damage and danger of death. They assigned one of the sages to compose this blessing, and his title in the tradition is Shmuel HaKatan, the small Shmuel. And he's called Shmuel HaKatan because he held himself to be very small. He was a very humble person. And not only was he a very humble person, but in Pirkei Avos, the ethics of the fathers, a saying is quoted from him. Now, I have to tell you just a little bit of background, because otherwise you won't understand. The ethics of the fathers. So wrongly, mistakenly, people think this is Jewish folk wisdom. Lots of cultures have their folk wisdom. This is Jewish folk wisdom. You learn something about how Jews think, how they feel, their priorities. Baloney. The very first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is the receiving of the Torah from God to Moses and its transmission down through several generations. And the Bartanura, the most famous commentary on Pirkei Avos, says this is to teach you that these ideas are part of the tradition of the Torah. Not that these people made them up. And the proof of it is Shmuel HaKatan, because the saying that is reported, that was Shmuel HaKatan saying is, Bin pol oivecha al tismach. Don't rejoice at the downfall of your enemy, which is a quotation from the book of Proverbs. So he certainly didn't make that up. He's quoting the Tanakh. Hello, this is not Jewish folk wisdom. What it's telling you is that he lived by this. He made a life centered on this type of principle. That's what these principles are telling you. Not that these scholars made them up, but they took these Torah ideas and they crafted a life around them. Okay, so now, why did they choose Shmuel HaKatan as the one to compose this blessing, because number one, since he was very humble, he's not going to do it because he's angry, he's upset, he's irritated, he's insulted, he's, they pushed his buttons. That's not going to happen. He's not that kind of person. And number two, his life is centered around don't rejoice at the fall of your enemy. So, clearly, he's the person who's best qualified to write this blessing with no personal animus. And as I said, when you look at the vocabulary, you see that it's not a vocabulary of killing or destroying in that sense. It's humbling and making them powerless so they can't work the evil that they want to work. Okay? Yeah.
Just a question about the nusach. There's like certain words that are brought in the Roda Mitzvah, for example, that are not brought. Like in the same bracha.
Like minim. You have the word minim, right? Yeah. So minim here are people, often they're Jews who became involved in other thought systems. Do I need to specify the one that was most popular and most common and the one that set up the most competition and so forth and so on and so on, right? During this period of time, it was Christianity, of course. And they aggressively, of course, they're in a group, there are all different kinds of people, but some aggressively approached Jews and tried to proselytize them. And that was an attack on our fundamental belief system. There, in certain circumstances, we have very, shall I say, aggressive, vigorous rules what to do with such people, with no mercy at all. Including killing them. We don't do that anymore, and the Chazon Ish explains why, and maybe you'll understand a little bit where it's coming from. Because, says the Chazon Ish, these people who attacked the Jewish belief system brought calamity on the community because divine providence responded very vigorously against that kind of activity. So the people in the community saw them as enemies of the community. So when the vigilantes took care of them, they thought, you're protecting the community against our communal danger. But, says the Chazon Ish, in our times, where we don't see divine providence that visibly, if the vigilantes will take care of them, and when I say vigilantes, don't tell it with the negative connotation. It was the halacha to do this. Then they will not be understood as saving the community from a danger, and then the impact on the community will be negative. So this is a long and complicated sugya. I'm not going to go into all the details. I don't know all the details. But just pointing out that there are cases where we do take this kind of vigorous action. That's not brought here in this blessing. This blessing is for certain types of people. Now the meaning that you're talking about, maybe depending on who they are, they might get this vigorous kind of treatment as well. But the blessing doesn't say it. The blessing does not say they should die. You have something, you have a piece of poetry there that they have that we don't have also? The Chut Shel...
Like the evil...
Oh, the evil empire. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Rome. That's Rome. The evil empire is Rome. That's a phraseology that you have in Chazal. Malchut HaRasha, yeah. Okay, but it's... Okay. Fine, that's the blessing against heretics. Shall I do this with you? Yeah, maybe I should do this with you. I said there were 18 and then 19, right? So I want to show you something. Take a look on page 315 or 314. This is Mizmor Dovid, which we say just before Lecha Dodi on Friday night. Now, when the Gemara describes the number of 18 for the number of the blessings in the Shemona Esrei, it brings several sources for the number 18. And one of the sources for the number 18 is the names of God in this blessing. So I will now ask you to perform a trivial exercise. Count the number of times that God's name appears in this blessing. This psalm, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. In this psalm. This is Psalm 29. For those who...
How many times the name of Hashem?
$18. He got 18. You got 18? Okay. Yeah, that's basically right. But now, let's see. If you're going to tell me this is a source of the number 18, and you have 18 blessings already, and you want to make an addition, make another blessing, how can you do that? Maybe you could add more words to one of the already existing blessings. But how could you add another blessing? Now, I'm going to try to see how much you can do. Reread the psalm and see if you can figure out how they could add another blessing. Done. Let it. Is there anything in the psalm which could indicate to you an option to add another blessing, but not necessarily to do so? Say again?
Bnei Elim, that word?
Good try, but that Elim, it just means the children of the mighty. Good try, king of the world. No, it's something much better than that. But you're on the right track. You're thinking on the right track. You want something else in the verse which be sort of like a name for God, but not necessarily forcing you to 19 versus 18. I'll give you a hint, it's in the first half.
After Kodesh.
Good try. Again, relevant, but something much better than that. You're reading Hebrew, you should get it right away. Maybe you don't think of it that way. On the third line in the Hebrew, 3 words from the end. What do you have there? Yeah. Right, Aleph Lamed. That's one of God's names.
It was part of the 18,
No. Oh, it was? Then you didn't count the 18 correctly. The 18 is Yud Kei Vav Kei. What in English Hashem, there are 18 Hashems, and Kei Kavod is the 19th. So it's a name, but it isn't the name. And you could choose, if you like, to count only the number of the name, or if you had to, you could then broaden the category to a name and include Aleph Lamed, and then you could have a 19th. I think that's terrific. I think that's terrific. I don't remember hearing this in Chazal, but when I put together the 18 and they add another one and it's got Kale sitting there, that just works out too nicely to miss. Okay. So, now back to 106. We'll go on to the next blessing. For the righteous and for the Hasidim. We got in. How about that? No, that's not what it means. I'll explain what it means in a minute. And for the elders of your people, the house of Israel, and for the remainders of their, how do they translate it? Scholars, which is good. Sofrehem, you think of them as scribes, but really scholars. And on righteous converts, that means people who become Jews. And on us. Just keep that in your memory bank. That's going to be very important. Let your mercies, Hashem, our God, apply to all the people in those categories. And give a good reward to all those who trust in your name in truth, and put our portion with them forever. So we're in twice. We come in twice. We're going to have to ask how we got in, why we got in, what it means. And we won't be ashamed because we trust in you. Baruch Hashem, Hashem. The support, Mish'an is what you lean on, and the assurance is not bad, what we trust in for the tzaddikim, for the righteous. Okay, let's take a look at some of the details, and then I want to talk about the structure. So you have the tzaddikim, those are people who do things right. Hasidim, in many sforim, like the Mesilas Yesharim and others, Hasidim is a higher level. The Chassid of Mesilas Yesharim defines as someone whose motivation in serving a Kadosh Baruch Hu is to, so to speak, cause him pleasure, so to speak, or to do his will, to become his agent, because that's the greatest thing in the world that could be done. So it's not just doing what I'm told. I could do what I'm told out of a lot of different motivations. I could do it for a reward in this world and the next world. I could do it because it's smart, because it's intelligent, because it's clever. No. All those are true, but the highest motivation is, this is what the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to be done. I want to do what he wants done. That's a chassid. Now the Avudraham, perhaps the earliest sefer written just on prayer. He writes a commentary on prayer among the Rishonim. He says the word chassid here applies to about tshuva. Really? Why is that? Well, one reason is this. Typically, about tshuva, of course, in those days, about tshuva doesn't mean he grew up with cheeseburgers, and scuba diving on Shabbos. It means he was a Jew and he was living by the Torah and he had something he did wrong. He did it wrong once or he did it wrong several times, then he changed his mind. It became better. Very often, one thing about tshuva does is he puts in his life extra safeguards against the kind of thing that he failed at. My Rabbi Zatzal put it this way, and it's almost like a kasha. Tshuva means to return. Now let's see. I did something wrong, and I was in a certain place before I did the thing wrong, and now I did the thing that's wrong, so I sort of fell away from there. Tshuva means to go back. The Rabbi asked, go back to where? To where you were before? That's where you fell from, isn't it? So do you want to go really right back to there? Maybe you'd like to put up a fence, or wear a straitjacket or something, because you want to take precautions. So chassid is someone who take extra precautions above and beyond what the Torah requires. That's a very high level in serving the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So that's what the blessing according to Avudraham is mentioning here. For the tzaddikim, for the chassidim, now for the elders, and elders here, Zaken stands for Zekon HaChachma. This person acquired wisdom. So we're talking about the great scholars of your people, the remnants of their sages, scholars, and on righteous converts. Now you could ask there, what are they doing there? What do they have in common with the previous? Tzaddikim are people who are great in their spiritual lives. Chassidim are even greater in their spiritual lives. Zkanim are the great scholars, filled with people with Torah wisdom. Then you have the scholars, and then you have the converts. So one explanation, which I think is very telling here, is the subject here is not great scholarship, great deeds, great wisdom. The subject here is purity of motivation. Why are you doing it? These people become great because they dedicated to themselves to it, because they understand its importance and its greatness and its centrality. A person who becomes a convert usually is leaving his family behind, leaving his prior culture behind, leaving his teachings behind. It's a very big step. We have special mitzvos for converts. And it's very interesting because the mitzvos that we have for converts double up on mitzvos that we have for other Jews. Since the convert is a Jew, all the mitzvahs apply to Jews apply to the converts. But for example, loving, there's v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, you should love all Jews, which includes the converts. And it says v'ahavta m'sager, and you should love the ger. It's a double mitzvah, a double mitzvah for the ger. Same thing with not causing harm with words. Al tonu ish achiv, person shouldn't oppress his friend. Al tonu sager, don't do it to a convert either. The Torah is telling us that whatever responsibilities you have for Jews in general, you have more responsibility for converts. Because, part of it is because of the motivation that it takes to make that gigantic step. So the 5 categories you have in this list are people who are being described as having this great purity of motivation. And then it says, V'aleinu, and us too. Us too. Yeah. Itu. Put me on the list. Put me on the list also. Yeah, really? Do I qualify for that? Is it accurate? Is it reasonable? You'll see. You'll see what it means. Now, give a good reward to all those who trust you in truth. This is a different characteristic now. When you trust in somebody, let's describe what trust means, and then I think you'll understand what emunah is. Trust means he tells me something, and I believe him because he said it. He may promise me he's going to do something, so I count on it's coming because he said so. I take it because he said it. I look at him as a credible source, so that if he says it, I accept it. That means I'm accepting something which I'm not independently verifying. Now, this idea of trust, I think the word emunah in Hebrew should be translated rational trust. I think the translation of faith that you have in many of our literature, English literature, I think it's very misleading. Because faith is a word that really comes from Christian English. You can call it post-Christian English, but it still came from Christianity. And in certain branches of Christianity, faith means something specifically that reason does not certify. It goes beyond reason in principle. Now, I don't think we do that. I don't think Judaism requires that. I don't think Judaism praises that. Reason has to certify what you're doing, but reason can certify it in a variety of ways. If you go to the doctor and he does the checkup and he says, listen, you need this medicine, and he gives you a prescription, and you go to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist says, oh yeah, we have this stuff. Let me ask you a personal question. Do you really want this? Honestly? Do you really want this? So what am I supposed to say? I haven't done the physiology. I haven't done the pharmacology. I don't know the chemistry of the medicine. Have I looked at the studies and the statistics? No. So am I lying when I say I want it? No, my doctor told me that I need it. And it's worthwhile trusting him. Of course it's reasonable to take medicine when your doctor tells you to. That's not unreasonable. That's not a leap of faith. I have good reason to trust my doctor. You're trusting your doctor based on reason that tells you he's credible. That's emunah. Emunah is rational trust. There are things that you believe in Yiddishkeit which you can't independently verify, but you have reason enough to trust Yiddishkeit to tell you that they're true. But you are living in terms of something which you can't independently verify. So the blessing here says that's a gesture. It's an important gesture of saying that I trust it. One of the things blessing is doing, I would never say I got to the bottom of the whole meaning, but one of the things it's doing is saying, let people who do that have a reward from you, so you can reinforce this gesture of trusting. Okay, so let's do this. And put put our lot with them. Wow. These are the people who trust God in truth. How many are they? 1%, 2%, 6%. Put me on the list also. Don't leave me off. I'd like to hear also. Really? Why? Who says that I trust God in truth? Am I looking for a lie? And we should be. Because we trust you. We do trust you. It doesn't say we trust you in truth. So if the others are getting the good reward because they trust you in truth, and we can't claim that we trust you in truth, why should we put on the list of getting the reward? Okay. I think the answer to those questions is in the following observation. The closing of the blessing is the support and assurance of the tzaddikim. We aren't there. We aren't there. Now there's a rule that the ending of a blessing should both encapsulate the essence of the blessing and also should be similar in content to the ending of the blessing. So the blessing, first of all, has two dimensions throughout. It's all of those great people and us, twice. And the last thing in the body of the blessing is us. And the closing is only the tzaddikim. Well, that's not the right style. Unless you say that the reason we are in this blessing at all is because the tzaddikim want us to be there. They want us there. They care about us. Part of their righteousness and part of their piety and part of their scholarship is caring for those who need support, need help, who are in process, who aren't on the level that they are. So really, the whole blessing is about them. And because they want us to be there, we're there also. But it's all about them. And that's why the closing is only about them. Now, this is my theory. I didn't see this anyplace. This is my theory. If you don't like my theory, which is perfectly acceptable, ask other people. Ask them why the closing of the blessing doesn't fit the normal standards for a closing. Okay, you got me? And I understand why we're there, because they want us there. There's a gigantic literature of what tzaddikim do for the sake of others and how they sacrifice themselves for others, both Talmudic literature and secondary literature. That's what's going on. Okay, one more blessing today. I don't know if you were here in the summer ever, if you'll be here in the summer, around the time of Tisha B'Av. And if you, I'm not recommending this, but if you look into the general Jewish press and see their writings about Tisha B'Av time, unerringly, unflaggingly, there are always articles about there's no reason to mourn the destruction of the temple. Jerusalem is rebuilt and it has music halls and sports stadiums and marathon races, and the idea of mourning is just passé, it's out of date, those poor from people, they don't know what's going on in the world. Let's take a look at this blessing and see what it says. It's called Rebuilding Jerusalem, Binyan Yerushalayim. And to Yerushalayim, your city, in mercy, return. Talking to Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Creator. V'sishko b'socha, and you should dwell in it as you have spoken. And build it soon in our days. And a permanent building. And the throne of David quickly prepare within it. Blessed are you, Hashem, who builds Jerusalem. Okay, let's look at the order of petitions here. The first petition is to Jerusalem, your city, in mercy, you should return. The second is you should dwell in it as you have spoken. The third, number 3, count them, 1, 2, 3. The third is build it. Not the first. The third is build it. You tell me, have the first 2 happened yet? I don't think so. Yes, we have yeshivas in Yerushalayim. Yes, we do. We have great communities. We have Hasidic groups in Yerushalayim. But the majority of the inhabitants aren't Shomer Mitzvahs at all. And the city, together with all of the wonderful things it has in it, has, in addition, a character which is utterly foreign to it. Should I celebrate the rebuilding when the first two have not been performed? Let me give you a brutal comparison. You know, I'm sure, that the atrocities that Hamas committed here in Israel are only the first step. At least one of their people went public and said, this is the first step in world conquest. It's not only Jews, and it's not only a Jewish state, and it's not only Judaism, it's all of Christianity, which is illegitimate. We're going to conquer the world, and we're going to make the whole world Muslim. Okay, let's imagine the scenario, which will never happen, God willing, where they actually do that. They conquer the United States of America, bombing things and running over and slaughtering like they are accustomed to do. Now, they've bombed. Now, Washington is a city with great ruins because of the great buildings and so on and so on. What shall they do to establish their kingdom over the country of America? And they decide, let's rebuild the old buildings just like they were. There's an infinity of photographs. We have buildings, plans and everything else. We'll build them just as they were. It's just that we'll fill them differently. You'll have the Congress, which will become the world's largest library of Islamic law and philosophy. And you'll have the White House, where the Caliph of America lives and celebrates his, right? You have the Supreme Court, and that's where the Sharia justices will mete out Sharia law, right? Now, imagine an American from Kansas who lived through this conquest and lived through the rebuilding and comes to Washington. Do you think he'll say, wow, look at that. The Congress building is standing just as it did. Isn't that wonderful? And look at the Supreme Court. Look at that. It looks just like it did before. Isn't that wonderful? I don't think he's going to say that because they're housing utterly foreign, antithetical, cultural entities. So if you're going to celebrate the rebuilding of Jerusalem for symphony halls and soccer stadiums and marathon races and all the rest, there's no reason for us not to be mourning for the destruction of Jerusalem. In particular, marathon races. Who invented international sports competitions? The Greeks invented it. Right. And we have every few years in Israel an international sports competition. And it's called the Maccabiah. Now, think for a moment. The Maccabees are the people who fought against the Greeks, right? Does that really fit together? That you put the name of the group that fought against the Greeks to celebrate a piece of Greek culture? Does that really fit? Not really. Not really. You know, I don't think they meant it ironically, but only at best it could only be ironic. It can't be accurate historically. So the idea that the rebuilding of Jerusalem is anachronistic to commemorate is certainly not correct. Yeah, sure.
When we returned from exile, do you think that same concept was in mind? Like, we must rebuild the temple, must rebuild the city as it was before the Babylonians?
No, not at all. Herod built a temple which was far more glorious than Solomon's temple, and we rejoiced in it.
It was better, you're saying?
Yeah.
So, okay.
But my analogy with America rebuilding Washington was only to say that the inner cultural contents can make the external reality irrelevant. That's all I meant to say. Okay, so now I guess we can start this blessing. This is coming of the Mashiach. Malchus based Dovid, Davidic reign. Here you have what in English literature you're not allowed to do. It's called mixed metaphors. As Tzemach David, so your translator writes the offspring of David. Tzemach in Hebrew means plant, vegetation. And you should quickly cause it to sprout. Well, I don't know what a sprout is, and I don't know what kind of plant growth sprout is, but tzemach is the noun, and tatzmiach is the verb, which indicates plant growth, which I will remind you is very slow, isn't it? And this is asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the coming of the Mashiach. So these words describe a process that could be very slow and gradual. Now, his horn should be raised up with your salvation. That means you're blowing the shofar, you're blowing the horn to announce the salvation. That's not gradual. That's a blast. That could be instantaneous. So you have two different metaphors here with two different implications. And that's very important because, as I've mentioned to at least some of you, we don't know how it's going to happen. It could happen either way. And the blessing here takes both into account, as if to say, the blessing is not committing itself to one scenario over another. It's asking for it with an open mind to accept it no matter how it comes. Because we hope for your salvation all the day. Now this is utterly unique. This is the only place, no, it isn't utterly, I shouldn't say that, because we have Kishil Seinu Ato. But this is one of the rare places where we in our attitude, in our position, are used as one of the reasons why Kadosh Baruch Hu should do what we're asking him to do. I'm not going to be able to finish this today, but I will point out to you that in the 13 principles of faith, all of them are simply statements of I believe, or I rationally trust, as I tried to indicate before, except for one. Where is it?
178.
When is it?
178.
178, thank you. All of them are, they translate, I believe, with complete faith, right? All of them are just, this is what I believe, except for one. And that is number 12, which is on 180. I completely committed to the coming of the Mashiach, and even though he may delay, nevertheless, I anticipate every day that he will come. This is the only one of the 13 which puts in my attitude, an attitude other than belief. So we have to ask, why is that? Why is this idea of the Mashiach requires a certain attitude of hoping, waiting for, longing for, expecting, whereas other things don't get that kind of, we're hoping for, waiting for, longing for the judges to come and take, for the rebuilding of Jerusalem. It doesn't say that. It says coming the Mashiach. We'll talk about that tomorrow.